He's muted, Bob.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, I just started the recording, so whenever you want to get started, you're welcome to start with introductions.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's 3 o'clock. I'd like to get the meeting started on time so we can end on time. I appreciate everyone being here. This is a joint meeting between the Dane County Cities and Villages Association and the Dane County Towns Association. We did try to do this last spring, and then you may have heard of COVID sprung upon us last spring, so we had to cancel our session then, but we did want to follow up and have this conversation with everyone today. So just as a reminder, if people can keep themselves muted unless you're speaking, that would be helpful to avoid background noise. I did want to introduce Jerry Durr. He is the president of the Dane County Towns Association. And before I introduce the speakers, Jerry, is there anything that you would like to say this afternoon?
Just, Bob, thank you, Bob. Just welcome everybody. Like you said, we planned on doing this face-to-face earlier in the year, and then all of a sudden this pandemic descended upon us, and doesn't look like we're going to be away from this thing for several months yet, at least. So I guess we just have to deal with what we got. Kind of hard to get used to Zoom when some of these meetings where you got a lot of documents to shuffle around. It's a little bit difficult, but we're trying to keep it going. But again, I welcome everybody for taking time to sit down with us this afternoon and listen to some discussion from people that have been around the block on some of these things, and some things that we've been talking about up in the northeast corner for a number of years is how we can, and there's my good friend, Mayor Paul from Sunbury.
Hey, Jerry. How are you doing? And Tim. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Paul.
And we've talked about this for a number of years, is how can we do things better, and how can we consolidate and become more efficient. Economies of scale and efficiency doesn't necessarily always work in government like it does in the private sector, but it's part of our job to try and make it work better. So, and I think we got a couple people here that can shed some light on that for us.
Thank you, Jerry. And just to follow up on that, you know, I think these conversations should be had. They need to be had within regions, amongst municipalities. You know, maybe there's not an opportunity every time for shared services or cooperation, but those conversations should at least be had. And if nothing else, it keeps the communication open between local jurisdictions. So with that, we have 2 speakers here this afternoon. Tim Hanna is the former mayor of Appleton, and he's the new executive director of the Local Government Institute of Wisconsin. He will speak about how Appleton has been working with neighboring municipalities and schools, and what has been working and not working, and considerations for intergovernmental agreements. And then I'll introduce Rob Henken. Rob is the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum. The Wisconsin Policy Forum is a statewide nonpartisan independent policy research organization that helps local governments find data-driven solutions to policy challenges. He will talk about how his organization has worked with municipalities to provide opportunities for shared services and cooperation. So we're going to start today with Tim Hanna. I'd like to welcome both of Tim and Rob here today. We appreciate you volunteering your time. So Tim, we'd like to start with you. Go ahead.
All right. So thank you, Bob. It's good to see so many people that I know. It's a rare occasion these days, all in one place. So good to see your faces. So let me get this. All right. I've got a quick PowerPoint here. Okay. First of all, I want to say congratulations to you for taking the time to do this, for getting your organizations together. Do you do this on a regular basis, the 2 organizations, or is this kind of a one-off for this, Bob?
I would say we try to do it periodically. There's no set schedule, but you know, every couple of years or so, I think we've tried to make an attempt to get together and, you know, talk and have guest speakers.
Excellent. Well, that I just want to encourage you to keep doing that, and I'll explain why in just a minute. So here we are, Local Government Institute of Wisconsin. In case you don't know what that is, it is actually a collaborative effort between the Towns Association, municipalities, and the Urban Alliance, which is actually part of the league. They all come together and fund the Local Government Institute. We exist to collaborate with others to find solutions for the efficient delivery and funding of local government services consistent with the needs of our citizens. So I'm going to talk about why collaboration is important, what are the advantages, and are there any disadvantages to collaboration? Real briefly, I want to go over what we call the collaboration continuum. So collaboration is oftentimes used as a catchphrase for any type of effort of working together, but there certainly are different levels, right? So what you're doing right now, I would say, is you're networking, you're exchanging information for mutual benefit. The next step would be coordination. That would mean that you're exchanging information and you're altering activities for mutual benefit and to achieve a common purpose. The next step would be cooperation, where you're not only doing that, but you're also starting to share some resources. And then there's full-out collaboration. And that is, collaboration is really when you are doing all those things, but at the same time, you're enhancing the capacity of another party for the mutual benefit to achieve a common purpose. So there's your collaboration continuum. Here's another picture of a collaboration continuum. And I think the most important thing in here is the top bar and the lower bar, the blue and the gold, right? So oftentimes we compete. We're competing for clients, for resources, for attention. And that is heavily based on turf. We're protecting our turf. We're competing. Then you go to, well, we can coexist. Still protecting our turf, but we recognize that there are other parties involved. Then you step up and you start communicating. You start sharing information or networking. Now you're starting to build trust, and the turf issues are starting to wane a little bit. Then you move into cooperation. You decide, well, yeah, we can do some things together. And as you move along here, cooperate, you coordinate, collaborate, and then fully integrate. Full integration, you can see, is there's no turf, because you have full trust in the other party and you fully integrated what you do. So I think those are the terms to really remember when you're thinking about collaboration or cooperation or sharing of resources. These are the things that are important. I just break it down this way. Look, if you want to end up collaborating, the first thing you have to do is you have to talk to each other. It's really built on, collaboration is built on trust. Trust is built on relationships. Relationships are built on communication. So you're taking a great step right now. You're communicating with each other. You trust each other to come to the same place and starting to share information. That's good. So often in local government, especially in Wisconsin, we're mired in we've got to protect our turf. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. So a number of years ago, one of the first things LGI did was we commissioned a report and called it a roadmap for government transformation. So this is the first report that was done by all of those local government organizations all working together. And the findings are fully supported by all of the associations. And we partnered with Baker Tilly to do that report. Why did we do it? Well, the fiscal condition of local government, it's bleak. We all struggle, right? The prospects for the future really aren't much better. Raising taxes, that's a non-starter in a lot of places in Wisconsin. But really, when you get down to the local level and you start talking to your constituents, cutting services or cutting quality really isn't acceptable either. So there's a lot of positive suggestions that came out of a lot of other statewide studies that were commissioned by the state. But what's happened over time, a lot of really great ideas. One of the things LGI did was we took those past statewide studies and put them all in one place. You can find a library on our website. A lot of great ideas there. And I actually served on 2 of those commissions in the early 2000s, the She Commission and the Kettle Commission. And there's still great ideas, but once that commission's done, you pass it on to the state and to the legislature, things seem to stop. They come to a halt. So that's why we decided, well, let's do it ourselves and see what we find. So we needed to understand, what are the barriers to adopting changes? Who cares? Well, reality is every resident in this state is served by at least 2 units of local government. Everyone is served by a county, and everyone is served by either a city, a village, or a town. And the cost and quality of service matters to every single resident of this state. And our ability to deliver local government services effectively and efficiently really does have an impact on our state's capacity to grow our state's economy. It really starts at the local level. So why collaborate? The fact is, the bottom-up approach to regional issues requires collaboration. If we're going to tackle a regional issue, we really have to be talking to our neighbors and working with them. The alternative is the state tells us what to do and how to do it. A collaborative approach is generally more effective, generally a lower cost than individual units, each addressing an issue on their own. And I'm sure Rob will have a lot more to say about that when he gives his presentation. But it's really about adopting a mindset of regional collaboration, and that it's linked to economic success and ultimately to global competitiveness. So it's kind of a busy chart here, but this is some of the findings, right? Some of the factors: an aging population, fewer people in the workforce. There's uncertainty about future federal and state aid. Isn't this about the time we start to worry, okay, what's the next state budget, biennial budget going to look like? And are we, I hate to say this, but are we going to be able to survive? Are we going to have to play defense now through through the budget talks coming up in the next part of 2021? And I don't know about you, but I hate playing defense. I'd rather play offense. But it's the name of the game. In terms of government services, you got 2 ways. There's a lot of ways you can tackle it. I'm going to go down here, right? You can work with your business community to grow the local tax base, and we all do that probably on a regular basis. We can reform the local government finance system. That's been talked about for decades in Wisconsin. In fact, the Policy Forum has put out a number of really good reports comparing Wisconsin's funding of local government to other states, and really the conclusion is we're really an outlier in how we fund local government in Wisconsin. But reforming that system is just a Herculean task, especially in these highly partisan charged political times. So how do we deal with these issues at local government, right? The day-to-day stuff that we need to do, right? And I talked about that. We could reduce services. Not a good idea for a lot of our citizens. We could raise revenues, raise taxes, generally a non-starter. And in fact, right, the state has stepped in and told us, you can't, you can't. We're going to limit how much you can increase your levy. Or we could spread the costs across a wider base. And that's where collaboration comes in. on cooperation. And the findings of the study really said collaboration is really in the genes of local government. There's a long history of people just collaborating, getting along at the local level and figuring things out and how to solve problems. We also found that collaborations, they need to be voluntary and organic, not mandated. The state can't come in and say, you have to do this. Generally, it doesn't work out quite as well as if you agree to do it on your own. We also found out one size doesn't fit all. What's good in Dane County may not work up here in the Fox Valley and vice versa, but we certainly can share ideas. And you really need to focus on the way services are delivered and really not the number of local government units. What did we learn? Well, collaboration can result in significant efficiencies over the long term, but not in the short term. You really shouldn't rely on collaboration to be a quick fix. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And not all services are suitable for collaboration. Some of the factors include association with a community identity. And I've got a great story about that, about a collaboration that didn't work for us up here. Geography. You may be limited by geography. Operating and capital costs certainly are a factor. Ratio of line staff to customers, and then mandates. That ratio of line staff to customers, the way I've explained it to people over the years is, as your population grows, you have a certain level of service. And you can't add, it's hard to add a tenth of a person to deal with a growth in population or the growth in demand of a service. It goes by increments. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to stretch those resources you have until you can't do it anymore, and then you do an increment, and now you've got capacity, right? And that's oftentimes a good time to look around and say, well, who else is doing this, and can we share that capacity with somebody else for the same type of activity? There's suitability factors. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I want to keep moving along here. So, obstacles to collaboration. We talked about that, right? Turf, competition for revenue growth. That can't be understated. A lot of times, this is the thing that gets in the way. Whose tax base is going to benefit if we collaborate? And then all of a sudden you get a growth in your tax base that's going to help us pay for services. Are we willing to share that growth? That's oftentimes where the rub comes in because of the way we're funded, heavily reliable on property tax. Perceived differences, and that can't be understated, especially when it comes to our residents' perception of what we're doing. And the perceived loss of identity, access, reduced control, accountability, threat to employees. But these can be overcome, and our study showed, but it takes nearly all of the following. You need to demonstrate improved service for all parties. You need to be able to identify a clear fiscal benefit. And as I said before, oftentimes it's not immediate. Your clear fiscal benefit, oftentimes, especially in major collaborations, is opportunity costs. Not having to spend money that you would have had to spend had you not collaborated. Shared perception of need across both or all parties. You need to have community support. There's that trust word again. And you need to have leaders who are willing to collaborate. Right? And I put this back up there as a reminder. Turf is big. Trust is how you overcome that. All right, real quick. I've been asked to share some of the examples of what we've done in Appleton. Right, one of my favorite people, Simon Sinek. You can create a revolution when we know what we stand against, but to create change that lasts, we need to know what we stand for. What are we for? It all starts with why. I apologize to those who've seen me do this before. This is really important. For us, it all starts with our strategic plan, and I instituted strategic planning back in 1999, and it really is at the heart of everything that we do. And at the heart of that strategic plan is our mission. This is our why. This is why we come to work every day. That when we work for Appleton, you're dedicated to meeting the needs of the community and enhancing the quality of life. One of the things I'm most proud of is when I left my job as mayor, you could ask any city employee and just about all of them could tell you what the city's mission statement was. They could also tell you how their job impacted the city's ability to meet its mission and how their job fit in to the bigger picture. Now, this is why it matters to us. Here's a map. That's Appleton. And I was so lucky that I had parts of Appleton in 3 counties, Outagamie, Calumet, and Winnebago. In fact, we were the largest city in 2 counties, largest city in Outagamie and the largest city in Calumet County. So there's your school districts. I had 5 pieces. I had Appleton in 5 different school districts. And there's our sanitary districts. So I had residents of Appleton served not only by Appleton utilities, but by a number of surrounding sanitary districts. But here's why that mission was so important. You'll see that our mission wasn't dedicated to meeting the needs of the city. It's dedicated to meeting the needs of the community. Because really, I'm going to go back, our community is that whole region. It's about the people. I know that when I was mayor, at least 50% of the people, 50% or more of the people who live in Appleton didn't work in Appleton. There are a lot of people who didn't live in Appleton that came in and worked in Appleton. But at the end of the day, we all live and work in the same community. That's why it was important for us to understand and get to know our neighbors. Here, and this is actually a partial list of all the different entities that we have some sort of a partnership, collaboration, something that we're doing together. And you'll see a number of municipalities on there, counties, not just the 3, but even beyond, school districts, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But you shouldn't limit, when you think about collaboration in local government, just to just other local governments. You need to think about, especially school districts. Because at the end of the day, the schools and the city or the town or the village, we all work for the same people. We get paid by the same people. So shouldn't we be working with them to try to increase our efficiency in the things that we do? And then there's other partners out there, business partners and nonprofits. We couldn't do what we do in the city of Appleton without the nonprofits that we partner with to do a lot of the things. I'm sitting in one of their offices right now, our Appleton Downtown Business Group. So here's some of the things. Valley Transit, there's our Valley Transit routes. Valley Transit is the local transit system. It's owned and operated by the city of Appleton. But it serves residents from Neenah all the way up through Kaukauna and everywhere in between. Our funding for Valley Transit has 23 different funding partners. So there's a significant amount of trust there for those partners to trust the city of Appleton to make decisions on their behalf and with their money. At the same time, one of the early things that I did as mayor is we opened up a membership on our transit commission to representatives from those other funding partners so that they at least have a say in some of the things that that transit system was doing. Now, ultimately, it's up to the city council. But in my 24 years, the city council never did anything different with transit than what the commission recommended. Here's our trail network. And there's a significant amount of collaboration and cooperation between all the municipalities to continue to connect these pieces of trails, which is good for all of our citizens. Those trails are heavily used today, and people are looking forward to each new section that gets opened up. But it requires a lot of coordination and, again, a lot of trust. But at the same time, you can collaborate and work with your neighbor to leverage outside resources to help construct those trails. A lot of times, a grant that comes in signed by a municipality or multiple municipalities often scores higher than other grant opportunities. Here's our Fox Cities Exhibition Center, one of the last major. This is in downtown Appleton, but it was funded by a sharing of room tax from 10 surrounding municipalities. They all agreed to share room tax to leverage the capital that we needed to build this. Now, it took a significant amount of effort, took a significant amount of trust for them to trust that the city, that first of all, that this was the right place for it. And it was good. There were benefits to all of those parties. But at the end of the day, they all realized that downtown Appleton really is where it needs to be. And the economic activity that comes, yes, Appleton will get its probably more than its fair share, but that economic activity will spread throughout the whole valley. And it sends a great message that we're working together to do that. Here's some other examples that I want to share. So here's an example with the school district. Several years ago, because we have this relationship with our school district and we talk to them on a regular basis, my finance director and the finance officer for the school district were talking, and in terms of cash flow, it turns out that the school district, because of their cash flow, would have to go out and borrow short-term money until they got their money from the state. Well, it happened to coincide with the same time that we were flush with cash. We had a lot of cash because we had a lot of tax collections. So now we have an arrangement with the school district that when they need cash, we loan it to them. They pay us interest, more interest than we would make in a short-term investment, and they pay less interest than what they would make for short-term borrowing. Everybody wins in that situation. But again, it requires trust. We have coordinated dispatch. With Appleton being in 3 counties, it's really important for emergency services that that dispatch be coordinated. I can't deal with 3 different 911 centers, 3 different systems. So we have a coordinated dispatch. We have automatic aid with Grand Chute and Neenah Menasha Fire Departments. So automatic aid is when a call comes in, its closest unit from whatever of those 3 departments, closest unit responds, regardless of jurisdiction. And it really, as we've tracked it over the years, it's amazing how it has really worked out financially. Nobody's getting an edge. Nobody's getting more than what they're putting in. And our residents are the ones that are benefiting because they're getting quicker response. Responding to areas in Appleton that we just can't reach as fast as Grand Chute can reach, or as fast as Neenah Menasha can reach. There's another one with the school district, an employee health clinic that we opened, our own health clinic with the school district, and we share the costs of that. In the first year that that was open, we saved, between the 2 of us, over $1 million in healthcare costs between the school district and the city by having our own clinic, and our employees benefiting because they had a place to go, dedicated place to go for things that normally they would have to go and either pay a copay or deductible. That's been a huge win for us. A fiber optic network, we put that in about 2002 or 3. But we didn't just connect all city facilities. We connected city facilities, school district, technical college, county, and Grand Chute. We shared the capital cost to put that fiber optic system in rather than each of us doing it on our own. We saved our taxpayers over $2.5 million in capital costs by doing it together. So I could go on. There's a long list. One of the things that we've done and that I've done over the years is I track collaborations. So twice a year, my department heads had to fill out a report and tell me what's new. Who are you collaborating in? What are new collaborations? Which ones are continued? And that document, when I left, was over 30 pages long of things that we do collaboratively or cooperatively. I'll touch on one more, weights and measures. This is something that's required. by the state. And oftentimes it's the state provides this, but we have our own weights and measures people for the city of Appleton. It requires a lot of specialized equipment, expensive equipment. And several years ago, we reached out, and now we provide weights and measure services to 9 different municipalities in Northeast Wisconsin, from Ashwaubenon to Ripon to Menasha, a number of them. And we don't charge them any less than what the state would charge, but they get a much higher level of service, and complaints are handled much more quickly when they come in, if there's ever a complaint about weights and measures. So that's another one where we reached out to our neighbors. And it benefits Appleton because we're using that capacity that we had as a city, and now we're being able to share some of that cost and provide service to 9 other municipalities. So that's just a few. So that's our story. There's some resources on the LGI website, localgovinstitute.org. There's case studies, which I would really like to start to add to and have some more recent case studies. So if you happen to get a request and you have a really good example, I would welcome that being forwarded. There's you can get the full report, that roadmap for government transformation. And there's a little bit about a regional collaboration initiative that we recently worked on, called the Future Regions Initiative. So that's it. There's my contact information if you ever want to contact me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Tim. Great presentation. So we've got about 10 minutes that we can take some questions. I guess I'll start with the first one, Tim. In your years of experience, I'm sure you've encountered some tough negotiations on collaboration. Can you cite 1 or 2 things that kind of turn the tables, if you will, to make it successful?
Yeah. So, like I said, trust is really important. And oftentimes you have to demonstrate that you trust the other party first. And it takes a leap of faith sometimes. So, I'm thinking about the exhibition center. And I attended city council meetings, town board meetings, county board meetings, talking about this project and how it was important, and got some tough questions. But you just have to be honest. And people know that. They know when you're being honest with them versus when you're trying to snow them. So you just have to be honest. I said I was going to share an example of one that didn't work, and it really had to do with community identity. And it was, we attempted a consolidation of Appleton and Grand Chute police departments, and went through a study. They were in an interim looking for a new chief, and that's always a good time to maybe have those conversations before they go out and make that investment. There were a lot of benefits to it, but I really hate to say what it came down to is, what are we going to call the department? And it really was a turf issue and an identity issue. Now, it wasn't all lost though, because out of those discussions, 5 new agreements between Appleton and Grand Chute came, and we are sharing more resources with them. There's more collaboration with them. There's more sharing of information. We work on cases together. We share detectives, all sorts of things, so that the trust that we built really wasn't eroded. Just didn't go the full bore. Let's have one unified police department. So, but there's a lot of good that did come out of it.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a few questions here. If you can either raise your virtual hand, we'll try that first. Mayor Brar, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I do. So, and with excellent presentation, and you have done a great job there in Appleton and that community. The question is that, you know, as you said, trust is the single most important thing. If it doesn't go. So, how do these communities together? Was there somebody already doing this, came into this position, or you actually got it started? So we got a lot of issues in Milton and around here, and I guess, you know, it will be, the resources are limited, as you put in one of your slides too. And we do share some of the things, but there's a lot more which we could do. So how did you get it started, and how do you go about building trust? Of course, you have to be honest and upfront. So thank you.
Okay. All right. How did we get started? So I mentioned about our strategic plan, and when you look at our strategic plan, what I showed you was the template, which had mission, vision, and key strategies. Every strategic plan we have they have key strategies, and the key strategies then are used by our different departments as they have to use those key strategies in thinking about the services that they offer. So one of the things I think we all need to recognize is that the people that work for us in our municipalities oftentimes have pretty strong relationships with people that have similar jobs in the neighboring municipalities. And so oftentimes these collaborations break down when it gets to the political level, when it gets to the town board or the village board or the city council or the county board. That's oftentimes when it breaks down, it becomes political, and turf issues flare up and things like that. I really believe that our employees, they want to work together and they want to collaborate. They want to do a great job. So in our first strategic plan, one of our key strategies was, I gotta think how it was worded. Actively pursue cooperative and collaborative agreements. Actively pursue cooperative and collaborative agreements. That was one of our key strategies. So what I did was I assigned every one of our directors a goal that each year they had to explore at least 2 new collaborative or cooperative ventures. I didn't say they had to be successful. I said they had to explore at least 2 new ones. And that was intentional. And the reason I said it that way was because it made them have to think about it proactively. It had to be collaboration that became front of mind, a forethought, not an afterthought. So they had to think about it. They had to actively think, well, okay, what am I doing? Who else is doing that? Who can I work with? That's the way we framed it. Meet the needs of the community. And it just so happens that there's a whole lot of other people out there trying to meet the needs of the community. So the question is, how can we work with them to achieve our mission? Can I work, are there nonprofits? Can we work with the school district? So they had to think about it. And over time, it's just automatic now. It's just part of the culture of when you work for the city, you're always looking for who else is out there. Can I establish a relationship? Can I get to know what they're doing and how they're doing it? Is there a way that we can work together to meet the needs of the community? That's how I got started. It's really embedded in why we come to work every day. And when you can do that and get your employees to start to believe it and live it, that's when this stuff really can take off.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a couple more here. In the chat, Carolyn from the village of McFarland is asking, how can we lay the groundwork for fire and EMS districts to obtain taxing authority from the state to help facilitate those types of entities? Any thoughts on that, Tim?
That's one of those suggestions that's been forwarded to the state for decades. All sorts of ideas about how do we diversify our revenue stream to pay for services. At some point, we're going to reach a tipping point where hopefully they've got to consider I call it reshuffling the deck. A different mix of revenues for local government. And that could be one of them. Oftentimes when you say reshuffle the deck or revenue reform or how you pay for it, the first thing you get accused of is you just want to raise taxes. And that's really not what we're saying. We're saying, no, we're not talking about raising taxes. We're talking about taking the revenue stream we have and diversifying that, giving us a little more control over how we pay for things. A lot like a lot of other cities around the country and villages. So that certainly is an option. And if the state ever gets serious about considering revenue reform, I'm sure that'll be one that could be. And it has been talked about before. And I know that the state firefighters union and the police union, they're always looking at that. And I know they would probably be interested in that.
Okay. So let's take one more question and then we'll move on to our next guest speaker, Mayor Esser from Prairie. Go ahead.
My friend Paul Esser.
Yeah,
How are
hi,
you?
Tim. I'm doing well. It's good to see you. Good to be here with you, Tim. I'm glad you took the time to do this. So my question has to do with purchasing. Does Appleton have a relationship with the counties that they're located in and the neighboring municipalities for the purchasing of maybe routine materials, supplies, and services? And if so, how has that worked? Has it been successful? And who heads up that effort if it exists?
Yep. We have a purchasing agent for the city that works in our finance department. So he's always looking for ways to save money and get better deals. So really the joint purchases are really on a case-by-case basis, but we do have several of them. A couple of examples, road salt is one where we collaborate. I actually think we worked with the city of Green Bay and a few other cities on road salt and got a better price per ton. You can order a whole boat of salt and then share it with your partners. It's oftentimes cheaper. Gas, diesel gas for our city fleet is one that I think we have a joint contract with some of our neighbors. Those are a couple that I can think of off the top of my head. When it comes to large capital purchases, there are some times when we've collaborated. Buses is one where we've piggybacked on contracts with other cities. And when you can order multiple buses from the same company, oftentimes you'll get a lower unit cost for those buses. So we look for those opportunities. I think we piggybacked with Oshkosh because they were replacing some buses also. So we're constantly on the lookout for those types of things, basically on a case-by-case basis. But we have somebody specifically, that's their job.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
You bet.
All right. Thank you, Tim. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Good questions, good answers. So just as a reminder, if people can mute themselves during the presentation, and then we'll try to have some time at the end of the session here for some additional questions. So Rob Henken is from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. Rob, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Bob, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity and for tuning in this afternoon. Like Tim, I'm going to walk you through a bunch of PowerPoint slides. I think you'll hear some common perspectives, and no, Tim and I did not talk to each other beforehand, so you'll see the extent to which our views are similar. But I think we've also at the Wisconsin Policy Forum perhaps had some experiences that Tim hasn't had, and so certainly hope to expand the breadth of insight and knowledge into this very important conversation, which, as you all know, has arguably become even more important in the wake of the pandemic and the intensifying financial challenges facing all of you. Also with another state budget approaching, I think this is a very opportune time to really be thinking about service sharing and collaboration. And I appreciated the question about, what should the state be doing to allow taxing authority for new fire and EMS districts, and I think it's a very important question. And so again, all of this is very timely. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And hopefully everybody can see my slides. You can see the title of my presentation. So let me just get started with just a little bit of background on the Wisconsin Policy Forum for those of you who are not familiar with us. We were created on January 1st, 2018 as a result of the merger between the Milwaukee-based Public Policy Forum, which had been around since 1913, and the Madison-based Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, which had been around since 1932. So there was a lot that the two legacy organizations had in common, perhaps the most prominent characteristic of which was the commitment to nonpartisan, objective research and analysis that is really designed just to help improve the work that all of you do by just hopefully providing new insights and knowledge to local government, school district, and state government leaders to also try to drive data-driven, informed decision-making. We also have as a target audience business and civic leaders throughout the state who obviously play a big role in policy making in Wisconsin. A little bit more information about us. We're a membership organization, and we work very hard to maintain this sort of modified pie chart that you're seeing on this slide in terms of the breadth of our members. We have more than 350 corporate, nonprofit, government, and school district members. If you took a look at that list, you would find them roughly equally divided among those three categories. And that's very important. And we work very hard to maintain that, because if I were to say to all of you that we're an impartial, nonpartisan, objective policy research organization, yet you looked at our members and funders and saw that they were mostly made up of corporate entities, you might assume, whether rightly or wrongly, that we maybe skew right. Conversely, if we were too heavily made up of nonprofits or perhaps even governments and school districts themselves, there might be an assumption among some that we skew left. So we work very hard to maintain this membership list for the sake of credibility. And so it helps further our mission. I'm not here to make a membership pitch, but if your local government is not a member of the forum, I hope you go to our website and take a look. Our dues are very affordable. There's lots of benefits, and I'll stop there because you did not bring me here to give you a pitch. So what do? We do lots of things. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with our research. I'm sure those of you who are not familiar with what the Public Policy Forum has done over the years, you're probably more familiar with what the Madison-based Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance did. One of the key things we do is we provide detailed analyses of some of the larger local government and school district budgets in Wisconsin, as well as the state budget. Some have likened us to sort of a local equivalent of the Legislative Fiscal Bureau in that regard, though I would also say to you that our analyses, and this is obviously not a knock on LFB, but a lot less technical and higher level and potentially more readable. So we just recently produced about 20 to 25 page briefs on the City of Madison budget, the Milwaukee County and the City of Milwaukee budgets. We don't focus on those budgets because we have any hint of favoritism toward these local governments. They're just the biggest local government budgets. We wish we had the capacity to do these types of analyses for others, but hopefully we'll get there someday. We produce something called a municipal data tool, which I hope that you folks are familiar with. And I know Jerry DeShane is on the call, and the league has really been very gracious in terms of promoting the visibility of this tool. But this is available on our website, wispolicyforum.org. It contains all sorts of information on these categories of municipal finance. And even better yet, it allows you to run your own reports. If you want to compare your own community to up to 9 similar sized communities in terms of how much you're spending on a per capita basis on fire and EMS or police or public works, it's very user friendly. You can just go and use this tool and produce your own report. So this is something that we do as a service to local governments across the state of Wisconsin. This is some of the research that we've done in Greater Milwaukee, and I know that you're not from Greater Milwaukee, so why am I showing you this? It's because we actually hope to expand and do this type of research in Dane County. Now that we are a merged organization and have a Madison office, the role we play in Greater Milwaukee, having taken deep dives into issues like bus rapid transit, which obviously has relevance to many of your communities, looking at the growing Hispanic workforce in Greater Milwaukee. As Tim had mentioned, looking at the revenue structure of the city of Milwaukee and how it compares to 39 peer cities. Understanding the complexities of charter school financing in Milwaukee. These are all the types of projects that we actually are available to replicate in other places. And our focus after Milwaukee is Dane County, again, not because of favoritism, but because it's the second largest county in the state. So just wanted to give you a flavor for some of the work that we have done and let you know that if you have ideas for research, we're all ears. But now let's turn to the subject at hand, which is the work that we have done in terms of shared services and consolidation research. So this slide is showing you some examples of some of the reports that we have done over the past several years. You will note here that these reports do involve communities in the southeastern part of the state. What you're not seeing on this screen is we just recently produced a report just a couple of weeks ago looking at emergency medical services sharing and consolidation for Jefferson County, which I imagine some of you are aware of because some of your service areas are common. We have looked at fire and EMS. The reason for that is because that's a functional area that tends to be one of the most ripe for service sharing responsibilities in light of the high capital needs, in light of the fact that often providing excellent service shouldn't be determined by municipal boundaries. But we have also done studies on public safety dispatching consolidation, public health consolidation, and also sort of broader scans on all of the functional areas. We did one for Greater Racine in that area. I should also note that we have studies that will be coming out shortly looking at fire and EMS service sharing and consolidation in La Crosse County, and another report, similar report in Ozaukee County. And this is really an increasing book of business for us because of the enhanced interest in this topic, really not just obviously in the southeast part of the state, but across the entire state. I mentioned Greater Racine. We've recently taken some very deep dives into fire and EMS and parks and rec in Greater Racine. And we are actually also about to launch a phase 2 study for Greater Racine that we hope will actually be pre-implementation for a consolidated fire department among the communities of the city of Racine and the villages of Caledonia, Mount Pleasant, and Sturtevant. So those are some examples of our work. I want to sort of reflect on some of our specific reports and some of the lessons that we've learned, which hopefully will be somewhat instructive to all of you as you're thinking about these issues. So the question of when to pursue service sharing, and I don't want to be repetitive in terms of what Tim had to offer, because I don't have a lot of different perspective. But this first bullet point here is really something that I cannot overemphasize. And when we are invited in by communities to talk about the possibility of performing specific studies, this is a point that again, we cannot emphasize enough. The real promise here, clearly all of you are under financial constraints, and clearly financial reasons are near the top of the list when you think about why you would want to consider greater collaboration with your neighbors in terms of service delivery for various functional areas. But really and truly, it is our perspective that the promise of service sharing lies not in saving money from budget to budget, but in the potential for individual governments to join forces to achieve a level of service quality and efficiency that simply could not be achievable if they instead decided to act alone. In many respects, and Tim talked about opportunity costs, but in addition to that, in many respects, this is about communities collaborating to get up to a service level that they mutually desire to get up to, and the cost of getting there collaboratively can be less than the cost of getting there individually. Does that mean you're going to save money? No, but it does mean that there is potential to get to that service level at a cost that will be lower than if you try to act alone. We've looked at national research. We've looked across the country at service sharing and found that really, again, this is not a panacea. And Tim mentioned this point, and I'd re-emphasize this point. For those who feel that service sharing is always the right way to go and that there's always opportunity there, that's simply not the case. But there are certain sort of conditions where pursuit of service sharing and consolidation initiatives make the most sense. And I'll just give you a few examples. When there are neighboring communities that are all facing the retirement or the pending retirement of a key leader or leaders, that's often a very good opportunity to talk about potentially enhancing your collaboration or even consolidating your service delivery. When either a higher level of government or a desire to meet the latest technological developments maybe spurs multiple communities to all need to spend money on something, that's often a good opportunity to consider collaboration and sharing. When there is clear duplication among local governments in a region, that is sort of a no-brainer. There does need to be a previous history of cooperation. We've tried to sort of make a square peg fit in a round hole, and we can provide the data and we can provide the game planning in terms of why service sharing and collaboration might work. But quite simply, if there is political animosity between some communities, it may not even be worth the time and the effort to go there. Now, hopefully that's rarely going to be the case, but we have certainly seen it happen. And finally, we have found that it's not just about wanting to improve the efficiency of services and the level and quality of services, but if there's a mutual desire to cooperate on broader economic development issues, that's often a good impetus. And that's actually one of the key drivers in Greater Racine, where those communities, particularly with Foxconn, sensing a desire and a need to cooperate on the economic development front, it was a natural step to then look at the service delivery front for the municipal governments. I now want to just share with you some examples of just 3 recent reports, and then I'd love to field your questions and engage in some discussion. So the first report I want to talk about is a report that we produced actually back in 2016. The North Shore Fire Department is perhaps not only the Southeast Wisconsin regions and the state of Wisconsin as a whole as maybe the paramount foremost example of the benefit of functional service consolidation, but even nationally, the North Shore Fire Department in Milwaukee County's North Shore is recognized as one of the truly successful models of fire department consolidation. And we were commissioned in 2015 upon the 20th anniversary of the creation of the North Shore Fire Department to sort of do the definitive analysis of how that had actually worked, and could we provide evidence that indeed this was as successful a collaboration as it had been built. And so we did a very deep dive into both the financial side and the service side. So let me give you a little bit of background. So this is, again, Milwaukee County's North Shore. These are the 7 communities that comprise the North Shore, just north of the city of Milwaukee, along the lakefront, 4 of the 7 communities. What we're showing you here is these 7 communities, who they are, and also where now the 5 North Shore Fire Department stations are located. And so going into this, each of these 7 communities, River Hills is the smallest with a population of only 1,700. Brown Deer, Glendale, Shorewood, Whitefish Bay all have populations in around the 14,000 range. But all 7 of these communities prior to 1995 had individual fire departments and individual fire stations. So as we look back to pre-consolidation and we just combined the staffing of the 7, there were 114 full-time equivalents at that time. When we then fast forward to 2015 and the consolidated North Shore Fire Department down to 107 FTEs. And you can also see the slight shrinkage in terms of command staff. So one of the byproducts of consolidation, despite, as I'm about to tell you, a significant enhancement in service level and quality, was the ability to achieve that enhancement of service level and quality with a reduced number of FTEs. In terms of apparatus, in 1994, 31 vehicles spread across the 7 departments. Each of them had to have backup equipment, which is one reason that number is so high. When we then fast forward to 2015, the consolidated department, only 16 vehicles. So certainly a very big reduction and both a result of greater efficiency and cost savings there. When we look at service level, the trained paramedics increased from 12 in 1995 among the 7 departments combined to 33 in the single North Shore Fire Department in 2016, and that number is even higher today, obviously. Response times, despite the reduction of those 2 stations, response times were maintained at roughly the same level as they were pre-consolidation. And that's because of the opportunities to strategically deploy resources among those 5 stations and not have to pay attention to municipal boundaries in terms of service response. So again, despite the reduction of 2 stations, response times roughly equivalent. And the ISO ratings, the insurance industry ratings that determine what homeowners are paying in terms of insurance rates vastly improved with the development of a consolidated department. Another very important factor and an advantage of a consolidated fire department is the fact that now there are unified training protocols and communications because it's a single department. When there were 7 individual departments, and I'm sure this is the case in Dane County, there's lots of reliance on mutual aid, and that's a good thing. But one of the factors there is that to the extent that mutual aid is required to respond to major incidents, you oftentimes can't have responders who their training and their protocols and their communications are slightly different, and it can impede the quality of the response. So this is another example of consolidation, or another advantage of consolidation. You put all of this together, and I'm not doing justice to the full report, but arguably a far better level of service using far fewer resources. What can I tell you about the finances of the North Shore Fire Department? So here's what we did. We took a look at the 7 budgets, combined them. We had to go with 1993 data for a variety of reasons. But in 1993, if you took a look at the budgets of those 7 individual departments combined, the spending level was about $7.7 million. If we simply adjusted those 1993 budgets to 2014 dollars, just before we produced this report, it's the last year for which we had actual financial data, just adjusting by CPI, these 7 individual departments would have been spending about $12.7 million for their fire and rescue services. If you then took an additional step and said, well, there have been advances in technology, there have been advances in standards. What if during those 20 years, each of these 7 small individual departments had really felt they needed to get up to a level of service that was equivalent to the largest department in the North Shore, Glendale, at that time? That would have required extra expenditures. So essentially, for these 7 individual departments to have achieved the level of service that the North Shore Fire Department was providing 20 years later, they would have had to have been spending collectively about $14.4 million. And what they were actually spending was $11.6 million. So across the 7 communities, a dollar savings of about $2.8 million compared to what they would have been spending if they had maintained their own individual departments. What else can I tell you? This is an interesting slide. So you may be wondering to yourselves, well, yeah, you're talking about collective savings, but how was each of the individual communities impacted? And much to our surprise, the impacts were very varied, as you can see. Certain communities benefited more than others. There was a big gala dinner when we rolled out this report celebrating the 20th anniversary, and I'll never forget the squirming at the Village of Shorewood table when I put this slide on the screen. But one of the beauties of this consolidated department is that each of these 7 communities saw clear benefits. And it didn't matter to them that some of the communities saw a greater dollar savings than others. Little River Hills, which saw a very small savings, nonetheless saw a savings. And think about the enhancement in quality of having a large department served or staffed with full-time career staff and this much higher level of paramedics. Think of the vast improvement in service that the citizens of River Hills were getting by being part of a larger fire department as opposed to their very small department that relied largely on part-time paid on-call staff. So despite this apparatus, what you can see is that we projected that if there had been no consolidation, the 7 communities collectively this had been discussed for a decade before it actually happened in 1995. At the time, there were several chiefs who were retiring, and the chiefs who were not retiring were not interested in being the chief of the new consolidated department. So that was certainly a very important development that eased the way toward consolidating. There were elected officials in these 7 communities who were committed to cooperation. And again, I'm not going to speak much here because Tim really covered this. But in the case of the North Shore communities of Milwaukee County, there's a consolidated public health department, there's a consolidated library. Over time, and really the North Shore Fire Department precipitated a lot of this, but these are communities that tend to have a lot in common, that had a spirit of cooperation, and that was reflected in their elected leadership as well. But perhaps even more important, they faced a mutual threat. At the time when they finally decided to pull the trigger on this, the city of Milwaukee was threatening to charge these communities for the vast amount of mutual aid that it was being called upon to provide essentially for free, because none of these communities really had the level of fire and EMS that they needed on their own. So there was both that threat and the fact that there were 2 high-profile major fires in the North Shore within the previous couple of years, where the chiefs admitted the response to those fires was insufficient because of the lack of service capacity. Finally, in this case, there was mutual recognition that bigger meant better. And one of the struggles was governance. They created it, while it's not an independent district in terms of having independent taxing authority, it is an independent entity with its own board. And interestingly, one of the things that the bigger communities gave up was they allowed the smaller communities to have equal representation on the board. So River Hills, with 1,700 people, has the same 1 seat on the North Shore Fire Department board as Glendale with 15,000 or so citizens. So I want to conclude by now talking just briefly, much more briefly, about a couple of other studies we did. The next one I want to cite is actually an example where consolidation didn't work. So we were commissioned by the cities of Oak Creek and South Milwaukee in Milwaukee County to consider the possibility of merging their two public health departments. And what precipitated this study was the fact that Oak Creek had lost its public health commissioner and was in a position where it could not hire very quickly. And so they reached a cooperative arrangement with South Milwaukee to share South Milwaukee's commissioner on a short-term basis. And that then precipitated a discussion, well, boy, if we're going to take this step, maybe we should consider just merging our two public health departments. So they called us in, we spoke with two mayors, and we launched an analysis. And so just to show you how we approach this, first of all, and this is a very important insight for service sharing, you start with the geographic and the demographic information of these two communities, and you look at this and you say to yourself, well, are these going to really be two good partners in terms of consolidating health departments? Are they alike enough that you're going to be able to find a way to do this that's going to be fair and appropriate for both communities? So this shows you where perhaps there was some doubt. But interestingly, when you look at the way these two communities were staffing their public health departments and the amount of money they were spending on public health, they did emerge as being potentially suitable partners for consolidation. So what did we do? We worked with the public health staffs of the two cities and designed what a consolidated public health department would look like. So one of the things we did was an org chart. We went much deeper and really sort of even defined responsibilities and priorities and so forth. And what we ended up coming up with was, you know what, this made a lot of sense. Again, despite some of these demographic differences between these two communities, they both had some severe challenges. They both had some gaps that if they worked together, they could fill more effectively than if they went at it alone. And we saw some considerable promise. And we designed that org chart and a framework that was going to address the various challenges faced by the public health professionals. And we did find, lo and behold, that there were not going to be any dollar savings, as you can see from this slide. But we also found that by essentially spending the same amount of money, these two communities could create a unified public health department that was going to provide a considerably higher level of service. So that may sound like it makes sense to all of you. And so end of the day, however, the question is, well, okay, if there are no dollar savings, why should these communities consolidate? Well, again, we were able to create a model where there would be greater nursing and environmental health staff capacity, not for a dollar savings, but for no increase in cost. The ability to develop a nurse staffing model that would emphasize specialization in priority program areas, we saw as a major benefit. Instead of having nurses who were essentially for each city responding to the crisis of the day, but to have specialization to address various public health priorities, that was doable via a consolidated model. The opportunity, as this bullet says, to derive mutual benefit from the expertise and skill sets possessed currently by only one community. The prime example there was Oak Creek had a data person who was devoted solely to reviewing public health data and using that data to make strategic decisions. South Milwaukee didn't have such a staffer. So the opportunity to share that staff person, and then conversely, for Oak Creek to be able to share a public health nurse that was employed by South Milwaukee who specialized in communicable diseases, which was a gap that Oak Creek wanted to fill. So there was some real opportunity there. This was a huge one. Both cities were having a whale of a time recruiting public health nurses. And via our consolidated model, they would have been able to both boost the pay a little bit, but also provide greater career ladder opportunities through having a larger public health department. And finally, just having enhanced programmatic capacity due to economies of scale. So we saw lots of reasons why consolidated made sense. The consolidation would make sense despite the lack of dollar savings. Ultimately, however, the elected officials, and I don't begrudge them one bit, didn't see it that way. Oak Creek in particular decided that this should not go forward. And so why was that? Well, for them, dollar savings were what mattered most. And again, I'm not casting any aspersion here. If that was the case, then that's fine. But really where it was most important was there was some community opposition about joining forces with a neighboring community. And given the lack of dollar savings, it just was not deemed as worth it to try to fight that fight. So I think that was it was an important finding. Quite simply, the potential to expand that public health service capacity ended up just not being a high enough priority. Again, dollar savings were the highest priority there. There was also a shift in mayors in the middle of the study, but that was a factor. Again, the fact that in our minds and in the minds of the public health professionals who work for the departments, that the ability to use a combined department to address recruitment and retention challenges was perhaps the foremost benefit of the consolidated department. Well, that just simply wasn't of great interest to the elected leaders of the community. Finally, Oak Creek's big issue was environmental health challenges, and they just felt that a merged department would not prioritize those challenges the way they wanted them prioritized. Overall, from the elected officials' perspective, there was just no compelling reason to do it and to address any of the community backlash that might have been out there, at least initially, at a proposal that some deemed potentially politically difficult. So in terms of lessons learned, and again, I'm going to echo some of Tim's comments. It's important to be clear about the objectives going in, and not to be a broken record, but if dollar savings are the only driver, then perhaps you shouldn't bother. In this case, we should have done more to engage the public health professionals and the public health stakeholders, also in the private sector, to convey the importance of enhanced public health programming. Unfortunately, at the time we did this, hey, if we're going to look at consolidating, it's about saving money, and we didn't express the importance of these other issues. And also, and this is very important for all of the studies we've done, oftentimes, again, elected officials in particular, no blame cast here, are going to look at the dollar savings from budget to budget and what the costs might be if you do consolidate. Oftentimes, what is not examined is the consequences of not consolidating, and whether the costs would end up even being higher if ultimately these communities would have to look at making service level improvements on their own. So there's one more study I was going to briefly mention, but I think I will not. And I will just conclude here by saying that, you know, going forward, we at the forum, having done nearly a dozen studies by now, do believe that enhanced service sharing and consolidation continues to offer great promise. You know better than we do that municipal fiscal constraints are, if anything, intensifying. Can't emphasize enough recruitment and retention issues, particularly in the fire and EMS area, where so many small departments are reliant on part-time, paid on-call staff. If this tight labor market returns, which knock on wood it will, you know, that's going to continue to be a challenge. And it's really the biggest driver why we are constantly approached by communities to consider doing service sharing studies on their behalf. Capital budgets are really emerging as a foremost challenge. The forum has documented rising capital debt levels at cities, towns, and villages across the board, across Wisconsin. As you know, a ladder truck is more than a $1 million endeavor. And so given the capital elements for fire and EMS in particular, this will continue to be a driver for things like public safety dispatch as well, and even public health in terms of some of the needs to equip offices and so forth. These might continue to be drivers. Again, we see the particular opportunities in the area of dispatch, fire, EMS, parks and rec, which I didn't talk about, but which I'd gladly answer questions on, but also public works and back office. We think there's lots of opportunity there. So with that, by the way, all of the reports that we have done in this area are available on our website if you care to peruse them. And I will stop sharing there and would be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Rob. That was very enlightening. So Jerry DeShane is asking, was there any research done to determine how much the ISO rating change impacted actual private fire insurance rates?
So it's a great question, Jerry. We did not try to quantify that. It's funny, I have a phone call scheduled for our Alzaki County study with an ISO expert for next week. So if it had been a week later, I could have at least given you some insight into that question. But you know, the difference for a jump from a 4 to a 2 in terms of what a homeowner is going to pay is not insignificant. And you have to define significant. But I want to just throw out, and I'm hesitant to throw out a number because I really don't know, but let's say it's in the $50 to $100 range, which I think is plausible. If you were then to match that up versus any increased costs that would be on the property tax bill, because again, sometimes consolidation does cost more, but only because you're bringing everybody up to a higher service level, but it could really offset that potential cost.
Okay, we'll go to another question from the chat, and then we'll go to Mayor Brar after that. Rob, Greg Heyer from the town of Cross Plains is asking, can you highlight principles of cost sharing in your fire EMS example, minimums per capita, caps, or dollars, equalized value?
So it's always a very sticky question. And so what I can tell you is what the North Shore Fire Department does, which I think is an optimal way to do it. So they set their budget for the year, and then that cost is apportioned out to the 7 communities based on equalized value, population, and previous year calls for service. So all of those factors are weighed relatively equally. A percentage is derived from looking at those 3 factors, and that a specific percentage is assigned to each community, and that's their share of the fire department budget for the upcoming year. So those are typically the 3 factors. And again, to me, it hits the sweet spot. I mean, you wouldn't want to just look at population, because population is not the only factor, obviously, that drives the need for fire and EMS response. Commercial value is a factor. The senior population is a greater factor than the overall population. So population is one component, but not the only one. By doing values, you tend to get at those communities that maybe have greater commercialization. Maybe you would pay a little bit more in recognition of the fact that your fire department needs to be staffed a little higher to deal with a highly commercialized area. But then again, you get those calls for service, so you're going to get at who's really using the service the most.
Okay, we'll go to Mayor Brar and then Jerry Durr after that. Mayor Brar.
You're muted, Mayor.
You're muted, Mayor. You're still muted, Mayor Brar.
Okay, great job. I remember that Todd Berry, who lived in Milton, used to run Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. So now I know where part of that went. Now, Mike, I have 2 questions. Number one is that you said you have some data tools where you can compare your community to 9 others. So I would be interested in information on that. And the second question is that I know you focused on fire department, EMS. Have you done anything with the police department? That is because the highest cost for almost any city. So I will stop it there. So thank you.
Yep. So I'll take the first question first. So if you go to our website, Mayor, wispolicyforum.org, and you click on the research tab, you'll see a little tab that says data tools. You click on that and you can go right into this municipal data tool and start playing around. And you'll see it's really, and I am no technology whiz, and my guess is Jerry DeShane has played around, and Jerry could probably handle it too. So that's further evidence. Just kidding, Jerry.
Don't assume I have any technical capability at all.
But it's very easy, Mayor, and user friendly. And again, I'm not inviting you to compare yourself with your neighbors, but again, it's just sort of it's a neat way to see what communities of similar populations are spending on a per capita basis on certain key functional areas. It gives you, other insights into just property tax rates and so forth. So it's pretty easy to use. So again, it's on our website and very easy to find. In terms of your second question, police, it's a great question. And again, if we were to just sit here and think about, again, I'm contradicting myself, but if financial savings and opportunities was the primary driver, the opportunity to potentially consolidate police departments would be one of the most attractive to at least explore, given that that's such a high cost area, given that it's a capital intensive area, and that's where the savings are often greatest. The problem is, and I don't have to tell this to any of you, it's also the most politically difficult. we've tried to go there with a few communities, and ironically, frankly, and I'm a resident of Milwaukee County's North Shore, they ought to be looking at police consolidation, but they have just been unwilling to go there because it's very politically difficult to say that we are going to relinquish local control over our own police department and join a consolidated department with our neighbors. Now, obviously, there are small communities that do rely on sheriff's departments or on larger neighbors to provide police services. But for the most part, we have not done a police study because we've never gotten to the point where there have been groups of elected officials who have really wanted to explore that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Jerry Durr. Jerry, go ahead.
Thanks, Bob. Obviously, your last comment, the parochial issues are always pretty strong, and sometimes it takes change in leadership to make that happen. A question about Oak Creek deciding that it wasn't a benefit to them. Do you think the residents were informed enough to drive that decision, or do you think that they were probably back in the shadows and the elected officials made the decision to say this doesn't work for us, irregardless of what benefit there might be?
Yeah, again, another great question. And again, I do not want to be critical of the Oak Creek mayor, who I think is a wonderful mayor and so forth. But I think it's the latter. I mean, I think there was no public outcry for change. It wasn't as if the citizens of Oak Creek were demanding an improvement in public health services. And I think there was a bigger risk that if a consolidation had been suggested, that there would have been a perception or a fear that, you know, service levels in Oak Creek would have been diluted because the public health department was being shared with South Milwaukee. And so I think the benefits that we were able to point out in terms of the enhanced service levels just never got out there because other than the fact that Oak Creek had a vacancy at the top, there wasn't a driver from constituents to really look at that issue. So I think, again, and I fault us as much. I just think we didn't do a good enough job laying out the benefits ourselves. But I do think that it really never got out there what the advantages of this approach would have been. It was just easier to say, well, look, we'll just go out and hire a public health commissioner and we'll stay on our own. And my guess is they're spending more today than they would have if they had pursued that plan. And my guess also is that this is going to come up again in terms of a broader conversation about a consolidated South Shore Health Department with not only Oak Creek and South Milwaukee, but also Cudahy and St. Francis. So I think they'll get there, but initially it just didn't gain traction.
And I think going back to Tim's earlier comment about what are we going to call it, you know, the parochial issue again, and frankly, the people that are trying to get out of their burning house or laying out next to one of our highways, they don't care what it says on the truck or the vehicle. They want help. And I think we got to get past that. And that's part of this consolidation thing.
Right. And just.
Go ahead, Tim.
Bob.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to throw this, one screen back up again because all right. You remember, so listening to Rob, listening to the examples, this came from the report, and it says it takes nearly all of these to have a successful collaboration. And you can listen to Rob's stories, and you can see, you know, the stories, which ones did they miss? Community support, right, on the health department. Oh my gosh. So if you're going to enter a complicated discussion about something major, especially something that's more out there in front of people, keep these things in mind and make sure you're deliberately thinking about each one of these things. As I've worked over the years and looked at different things, the ones that don't succeed, I can point to one or two of these factors that didn't happen. So, I mean, this is really good information for you as you dive in. Make sure you're thinking about this, and particularly think about it ahead of time, how you're going to do it, so you don't get tripped up after you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy going into it. So I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that. We forget the kind of the nuts and bolts of it when we get into the meat of it. It's like, you know, if you go back and kind of look, use this as a template, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of energy, and probably increase your chances of success.
I would agree 100%. And Bob, I'll be very quick, but just the one thing I'd add, Tim, is that clear fiscal benefit is a very nuanced question. The report that we're about to release on lacrosse, we've designed a consolidated department that collectively would cost these communities $2 million more than they're spending today. So if I just tell you that bit of information, you'd say, well, that's crazy. They'll never go for that. Well, we also took a look at what we think each of them will have to spend over the next 5 to 10 years to address their current service gaps. And if they do it alone, we think collectively they'll have to spend $2.8 million. So it can be a very difficult, nuanced question as well.
Okay, we got maybe 5 minutes. It's 4:30 right now, but I think we can run about 5 minutes past. Are there any last questions that the group has? You can either raise your virtual hand or you can just speak up if you want to. I'm going to actually put Jerry DeShane on the spot here. With your role as the leader of legal municipalities in Wisconsin, thank you for joining our workshop here today on shared services. With your perspective in running the league, do you have any advice or words of wisdom that you can share with our group today?
I hate it when people put me on the spot. So I'm going to say, well, Mike Colas is on the call. He should be on the spot too.
That's fine.
no, I'm
ready to do that, Barry.
What's that, Jerry?
I'm just about ready to do that.
Oh, okay, there he is. Yeah, he's got more dead animals on the wall than I do. No, I'm sorry to take up your time. All I can say, and it's been said several times by both Tim and Rob and others, and Jerry as well, I think this is one of those cases where we all know we need to do more of this. But if you don't approach it right, my experience has been it gets blown up in the beginning and you never get to the substantive parts of the discussion. Don't underestimate whose name is on the side of the truck, Jerry. I've seen it and it's silly, but if you don't deal with it, good collaboration doesn't happen. Beyond that, you've heard better advice from better men than me.
Thanks, Jerry.
This is Carolyn Clough from the Village of McFarland, and one of the things I think is interesting about this presentation coming to this group is we do collaborate. We are a group of municipalities who has chosen to at least meet and talk to each other. So I do think we have a somewhat unique opportunity with this group and the idea of collaboration to lay some groundwork. I heard, Tim, you were talking about looking at consolidating a police department when the chief left. It seems to me like that's way too late. Like you should have had that conversation a long time, because now it's like, oh crap, we don't have a chief and we got to do something. And then someone comes in and they're like, you want to consolidate departments? They're like, no, we don't even have a chief. We don't know what we're going to do. But we might have an opportunity to use some of our time as this group, and maybe we could talk about this in future meetings, Bob, but how could this group be part of facilitating the idea Tim brought up, exploring what collaborations would look like. Consolidation of fire and EMS departments would be something we could potentially do in Dane County, but it's problematic. I mean, whose name is on the side of the truck? I mean, that's legacy for some of those guys. Their grandfathers were on that fire department. And so they want to wear the shirt that says McFarland or Monona or Cottage Grove, because that's family history to them. And that is motivation for them to participate. But maybe we could pick this up and not just leave this here, Bob, and have it on the agenda and see where we could really go to actually make some collaborations happen, and maybe keep track, like Tim was, of what collaborations had come out of DCCVA members working together.
Yeah, I'd like to use this as a springboard, if you will. Tim, go ahead. You had a response.
I was just going to say, make a real simple suggestion. Make a list of what you're already doing. If everyone did that and shared it, I think you'd be surprised at how much you're already working together. And there may be some small things and some insignificant things. The value is there's a level of trust already in things that maybe your constituents don't see that you can build on. But if you just take the time to look at what are we already doing, most often you'll be surprised.
Okay. Let's go to Mike Colas. Mike, can you introduce yourself for the group, please, and then we'll wrap up after that.
I'm Jerry's counterpart for the towns, and I do text Jerry pictures of my kills. Most recently, a 6x6 elk, and I do remind him that I'm a good shot, and that if annexation isn't reformed, that he might find himself on the wall as well. But let me build off of what Tim just said. I think we have a short-term and a long-term strategy on this front. On the short term, all of those criteria that Tim had put up need to be leveraged in the best manner that they can. And the most challenging one, I think, is trust. So create a list and figure out what you're doing right now and build off of the trust that you have. The long term is that we currently have a series of systems in place that create mistrust. I'm reading a great book right now called Atomic Habits. I highly suggest you read it. And the entire book is based on the premise that you got to have the right systems and structure in place before you start working on all those things on the list. Financial advantages are not going to be able to overcome a lack of trust. And we have systems in place, namely the taxing system, namely the land use system, that create embedded mistrust between communities. And we can work our tails off on all of those items that Tim had noted and Rob had noted, and we will achieve some success. But if we want to achieve tremendous success, success that our citizens deserve, we have to address those fundamental systems problems that build in mistrust. And heretofore, we haven't been able to do that. We've studied the living daylights out of the financial system, the fiscal system. Tim noted every thing that he's been on. It does age him a little bit. It goes way back into the 90s, and we haven't been able to overcome this. We have to address that if we really want to achieve a substantial, long-lasting change.
All right, thanks, Mike. So we'll wrap this up here. Jerry Durr, do you want to offer some closing comments, please?
I just want to thank everybody. I guess my last comment will be, like a lot of the stuff I've seen in the last 4 decades, if we have this discussion and put all these ideas on a shelf someplace, nothing is going to happen, because the shelves downtown are full of studies and smart growth plans and everything else that are stacked up copy after copy, and they're just laying there collecting dust. If we're going to keep something like this alive, we have to keep the discussion going, and now put those lists together. Like Tim said, there's nobody in the state better that I know of that has gone through these things as thoroughly as Tim has in the valley. And there's a lot of good examples up there of what works and what didn't, and I think we saw some of that today. And again, I'll say, we should have another discussion on work in progress here in a few months. Hopefully we can sometime do this face to face, but I guess we haven't got control of that quite yet. But thanks again for everybody tuning in. This is the kind of discussion that we should be having.
Okay, let's go to Greg Heyer from Town of Cross Plains, and then I'll offer some closing comments.
I was just saying thanks to everybody.
Okay, all right, very good. So Tim and Rob, thank you so much for being here today. I think you can sense that there is some excitement, some momentum here, that people do want to work together. And I think from my perspective, it's about conversations with people. It is about building trust. It's trying to lead by example. And oftentimes it takes many conversations before you can build that trust with someone else. So again, I think as Carolyn had noted that, if we can use this as a starting point and build off of this, I think we can build some successes. And I think you have to start small and then work your way up to some bigger successes. That's part of the trust building. So I think this was a very good session today. This is one of the benefits of Zoom. I know people are tired of Zoom meetings, but it is a way to bring people together all across from the state of Wisconsin in many cases. and have these conversations. You know, there is a place for face-to-face. We're not ready to have that quite yet, but at some point we will. So we will continue to, the cities and villages will continue to work with the Towns Association, and we will try to perhaps schedule some more of these sessions and offer some more concrete ideas on how we can work together. So thanks again for everyone for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent job, everyone. Super duper.